Welcome, everybody. It is April 14th, 2020, and this is the Rebel News live stream. I'm David Menzies, and I'm joined, as always, by the lovable Sheila Gunn-Reid. And when I say as always, I mean when we fill in for the big boss man, Ezra Levent, who is off on a very important assignment. Pinky swear. Sheila, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. I'm staying healthy. I'm glad to hear that you're healthy, or that you haven't told me that you're sick yet after all your trips to the airport. Before we forget, I think we should tell everybody what we're doing here. You did allude to the fact that this is the noon live stream. Ezra does normally host. But this gives us an opportunity to interact with our viewers, which I think is fantastic. I don't get out to see the people enough these days now that we're all sort of sequestered at home. But it gives the viewers a chance to interact with us and help us pay the bills, because unlike CBC, or for that matter, the rest of the mainstream media, we would never take a dime from Justin Trudeau because we can't hold the government to account when they're helping us keep the lights on. So what you can do at home, if you'd like to support us here at Rebel News, is you can throw some money into the super chat. That's what YouTube calls what we're doing here, and it'll highlight your comment or question or concern, and David and I will be forced to at least read it and probably even address it in our own special ways. And yeah, that's one of the best ways for you to help us here at home. And I think it's a democratic way of doing things, because we actually find out what's of concern to our viewers instead of us just assuming.
100%, Sheila. And you know, you mentioned something in passing, sequestered at home. Sheila, we've been told time and time again, whether it's the mayors of the cities in Canada, whether it's Justin Trudeau, whether it's the premiers, stay at home, drive down the highway, there's signage lit up saying, go home, stay at home. And yet, you know, it's kind of do as I say, do as not as I do, isn't it, Sheila? Because I think one of the most egregious examples was just the other day when we had that private flight to Ottawa where Elizabeth May plus Andrew Scheer plus the entire Scheer clan cramming into a little tube, and definitely no way experiencing or doing social distancing. There was no way you could be 2 meters apart. Well, what is your take on that, Sheila? Because I just think especially on Mr. Scheer's part, what an incredible fail in terms of this whole idea of, here, we're going to tell you all what to do, but of course the rules don't apply to me.
Well, this is just the theme of the Conservatives. It's perpetual disappointment. This is when they continue to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Yeah. They could have owned the narrative on the fact that Justin Trudeau self-sequestered for 30-some days because he was setting a good example for all of us by shuffling out of his house every day and speaking for 6 minutes and then going back inside after his family left to Quebec, to Harrington Lake. And then Justin Trudeau crosses a provincial boundary to join his family in Harrington Lake after telling everybody to stay home, telling everybody to just talk to your family on Skype or Zoom or whatever, and after Premier Doug Ford telling everybody, stay the heck out of cottage country, and after the Quebec government saying, don't come to Quebec. If you're in Ontario, stay the heck home. Justin Trudeau does completely the opposite. And then instead of the Conservatives leading by example on this issue, they just shoot themselves in the foot, and then there's no political hay to be made because the Conservatives really aren't any better on this issue. It's just how Andrew Scheer has operated from the very beginning. It's very, very disappointing. However, there's another whole side to this. So Justin Trudeau is being eaten alive on social media and by, the few conservative journalists there are out there, and even some in the mainstream media, for completely defying the rules he's laid out for everybody else and not respecting the provincial recommendations of both Ontario and Quebec by going to Harrington Lake to visit his family. CBC comes out with this story about Andrew Scheer. It was just and Elizabeth May did the tattling. Green Party leader Elizabeth May tattled on Andrew Scheer to CBC. So then the whole narrative of everybody attacking Justin Trudeau shifts over, of course, to everybody attacking Andrew Scheer for doing pretty much the same as what Justin Trudeau did.
And of course, Elizabeth May would never subscribe to a double standard. Like, she would never appear, say, in a Victoria Day parade in British Columbia in a Dodge Viper muscle car with something like, 600 horsepower. I'm not sure what the generation was. Do you remember that?
She was taking
footage,
a private
Sheila,
plane to Ottawa. Like, this whole story, Elizabeth May, Green Party leader that just won't seem to go away. I thought she resigned or something. She was actually taking a 9-seater plane to Ottawa from her home. And so for her, I guess all of a sudden, like so many of the environmentalists right now, they're sort of being mugged by reality of the fact that, you know what, if you want to social distance and commute and stay safe and stay alive, well, fossil fuels are the best way to do that in a coronavirus outbreak. She was on a 9-seater plane, and she and then Andrew Scheer sort of elbows on and uses it as the family minivan. But yeah, she's a hypocrite in all of this too, because she could have just telecommuted to work like she tells everybody else to do when there isn't a pandemic.
Yeah, poor Elizabeth May. Maybe she thinks a Dodge Viper and a Challenger jet operates on dilithium crystals or pixie dust or something like that, Sheila. But I want to get serious here and contrast that with what happened on Good Friday in Oakville, Ontario. I have a report going up, I think, later today about this. It was a gentleman by the name of Todd Nelson who decided to take his 3 young children to an abandoned community center parking lot. And I went out to the community center yesterday, and the only car there was mine. And by the way, Sheila, signage not indicating that the parking lot was off limits, and certainly the parking lot entrance and exit, those weren't blocked. And he's skating along, and people have done inline skating. You're at least 2 meters apart because you don't want to collide into another skater. They live together as a family. They're under that maximum congregation number of 5. What's the harm? Well, the harm is a bylaw officer sees this, comes over, sees that they're not practicing social distancing, and Todd Nelson gets a ticket for $750 plus surcharges. It comes to $880. In other words, Sheila, precisely $220 per skater, and he's going to cough that up. So what really grinds my gears here, in light of Scheer and May getting on that private jet in a crammed tube 30,000 feet above the ground, presumably breathing in recirculated air. They're in the outdoors. They all live together. There's no one else at the parking lot. There's no parking lot. There's no signage indicating the parking lot's off limits. And they get the full brunt of the law, almost $1,000 at this time when so many people are out of work and just they don't know how they're going to make ends meet. And meanwhile, the people who are elected leaders of parties are preaching to us to not do the very activities that they're doing, i.e. jumping into a private jet. And by the way, I should mention inline skating, Sheila. You'd think Elizabeth May would like that. I mean, that is just complete human horsepower. There are no emissions coming out of those skates, unlike what was coming out of that private jet she took. I think this is galling, Sheila. It's insane, because that man is going to take that ticket and go back home and into the house where he is with those kids, and even more close quarters. The cure is going to be worse than the disease. I shudder to think. It's a little different for me because I live in the country. I have a lot of land. Nobody's around. Like, my family owns all the land on one side of the road. So, like, the kids can roam. They have dirt bikes and stuff that they can do. We would dream of having pavement to rollerblade on, but that's another story.
I don't know what it's like. Like, it's got to be so difficult for parents in town who can't take their kids to the park, to the swings. They can't even rollerblade in an empty parking lot with their children. I mean, this has got to be a crushing burden on families. And then you have this government bureaucracy that is completely insane about these rules. I was reading a story about how there's a COVID-19 outbreak in a migrant shelter in Toronto, and which in and of itself is something that we probably should talk about eventually. But buried in that story, somewhere down about paragraph 13, was the fact that on Saturday night, they sort of, or Saturday, they ordered, or they gave powers to the municipalities to, enforce these social distancing rules. And by Sunday night, they had levied 48 different tickets in the city of Toronto. 48? That's crazy.
And the mayor was bragging about it.
Yeah, bragging about it. Like, one of our colleagues pointed out in the morning meeting this morning that this is probably just a way to make up government revenue because nobody's driving. So there's nobody issuing, speeding tickets or parking tickets or whatever, because these fines, they're hefty. It's not like they're giving you and they're not giving you a warning. They're just saying, okay, here's your gazillion-dollar fine plus surcharges. And you're not working. Good luck feeding your kids now. I got to tell you, I have a personal story about just how stupid these social distancing rules are. So I live next door to Elk Island Park, Elk Island National Park. It's huge. And I think by saying I live next door to it wouldn't give away my location, because it is absolutely huge. I use the park for recreation. We snowshoe, hike in there, whatever. But there's a through road through the park because it is so massive that people from a community on the backside of the park use to commute. If you're going to work, if you work in Edmonton, that's the shortcut. Otherwise, you have to go all the way around this massive national park to the east or the west. So I get that the national parks are closed. That's fine. Close the parking lots, close the amenities, close the washrooms, close whatever, close the canoe rentals, even though everything's frozen. Do that. But they actually closed the park gates so that people can't use the highway through to take the shortcut home to their community. Yeah, I thought, and the buffalo roam inside the park. So I thought a couple days ago, I'll just take my girls, we'll zip through the park. Just something to do. Get out, look at the buffalo, see the baby buffalo, because they're just being born right now. And we get there and the park gates are closed on both sides of the park. And instead of stopping people from going to the park, it did the opposite. There were 5 cars parked at the park gate. So they wanted to close the park gate so that people aren't congregating in parking lots. Well, all they did was turn the park entrance into a parking lot because people were parking there and then walking in knowing full well there were no park staff there to stop them. It's crazy. Plus, I pay like $100 a year for the courtesy of using that road so that I can travel through the park. I buy a park pass. So, I mean,
that
it's
makes
just
no
insane.
sense, Sheila. So
No.
they have prevented people from using that shortcut to get to Edmonton. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's a shortcut. It's a through road. It's a highway. It's a 2-lane paved highway that runs through the park. And instead of just closing all the parking lots so you can't stop, they've actually closed the entrance to the park so that people can't even drive in their cars through the park without stopping, because somehow that is contagious.
So where are all the climate Cassandras that, want us to reduce our carbon footprints? Because right now they're forcing you to increase your carbon footprint. That makes absolutely no sense. Like you said in your preamble, I understand closing the parking lot, closing the park itself, but the through road, especially when it's known that it's a shortcut to Edmonton, it's just crazy. And and getting back to the Nelsons too, Sheila, when you look at the tips of how people should cope with the coronavirus, when they say stay at home, when you drill down to the fine print, they're very quick to point out, well, don't be a couch potato now. Get outside, get some exercise. Exercise is good. That's why we keep running those participation ads showing that the 30-year-old Swede is healthier than the 55-year-old Canadian. And get fresh air. So the Nelsons, if I was arguing this in court, I would say, listen, I was just doing what I was mandated to do. And the perverse irony exclamation point on this story, Sheila, is the most dangerous aspect of that encounter was the bylaw officer, because here's somebody, you don't know if the bylaw officer has been exposed. You don't know if he's positive or negative when it comes to COVID-19. So in the process of giving the ticket, I would argue that was the biggest point of danger that the Nelson family encountered on that Good Friday skate.
Yeah, I mean, I wish the Nelson family had just told the police that they identify as a rail blockade. and then it would have been fine, because apparently the police, they can't do anything about that. Just if the Nelsons want exercise, put on your rollerblades, head down to the CN yard and throw some garbage on the tracks for some calisthenics and upper body workout, because that's perfectly fine with the police. They'll let that go on for weeks and weeks. No one's going to get a ticket. No one's going to get a fine. No one's going to get told to go home. In fact, they'll probably, set up like a boundary so other people can't bother you. If I recall what they did with the rail blockaders, that's what everybody should do from now on. Sorry. No, I'm rail blockading. Leave me be.
And you know something else, Sheila? In all seriousness, the good weather, the warm, sunny days, they're coming. And when people have been cooped up for weeks and it's a gorgeous day outside, especially maybe in the big cities, if you don't have air conditioning, you're going to be naturally inclined to get outdoors. You just can't take it anymore being in like prison-like conditions. And I'm telling you, Sheila, if law enforcement and bylaw come down hard on regular tax-paying, honest, law-abiding citizens and start handing out $880 fines, it doesn't take that much, maybe 1%, 2%, 3% of a big city like Toronto. If people start, subscribing to civil disobedience, no amount of law enforcement will be able to contain that. It will be out of control. They have to be extremely careful. They can't do things like go after the Nelson family to make an example of, because people aren't going to take it.
Well, and it seems somewhat, and I'm not a doctor, this is just anecdotal. I also grew up with my mom telling me conspiracy theories about how the Chinese sent the flu over on mandarin oranges, and that's why we all got it in the winter. So, I could be completely wrong and looking at things through the lens through which I was raised. But correct me if I'm wrong, but the flu season isn't this summer. And I think that's because everybody is no longer together, cooped up. We're outside, we're having fun, we're doing stuff. We're naturally socially distancing because we're further apart from each other because we're outside doing things in the fresh air and not sitting in close quarters and recycled air. It just seems so counterintuitive to be keeping people inside like this as the weather gets nicer when there are other options. I did a story, it might be up now, but I finished it yesterday, about what they're doing in the Czech Republic. They've mandated, and they did this like almost a month ago, I guess it was March 18th. They said, okay, you guys can go out in the public. Everybody just wear masks. And to the point where if you're a nudist, it's perfectly fine for you to just be like sunning your bum, although I think I said something different in my video, down by the lake, as long as your face is covered, which I'm just naturally an anti-nudity prude. And I think, like your genitals could harbor infectious disease. Do me a favor, cover those too. But yeah, like you can be naked in some places of the Czech Republic as long as you cover your face. And as it turns out, their rates of infection and death are a lot lower than Canada's, and they're closer to that like European epicenter. They were exposed a lot sooner than us. So, I mean, we could return people to the outdoors at the very least if we just said, okay, wear masks. Ticket people for not wearing masks, but don't ticket people for being outside. That's crazy.
You know, Sheila, I share your question of what's the deal with nudism. You know, I've never had this compulsion to gather in a park or some kind of colony with all my clothes off. And I want to, and by the way, I don't mean to be mean,
so
but
glad for that, David.
from the photographs I've seen of some of the nudists, these are the people that should be wearing clothes, you know, but that's just me. It's not exactly that you're going to see a score model walk by in the buff. If there are any viewers watching and you have any connection with nudism and people who are nudists, can you kindly explain to Sheila and I? Because I don't get it. I first of all, like, where do you look when you see somebody that's naked, right? I mean, like, I would find it a torturous experience, and I would go out of my way not to be nude anyway. And isn't that one of the two top nightmares that the general populace suffers? One is falling to your death endlessly, and the other is being nude in public. So why is a nightmare embraced by some people, Sheila?
I guess, though, every nightmare is embraced by some people. You just pointed out, like, falling to your death. And being naked in public. Well, people actually jump out of perfectly good airplanes, and they call it skydiving, and people pay a lot of money to do that. So, I mean, maybe this is just the same thing. I don't know. I can't get my head around it. I would never skydive, just like people crawl around in caves and stuff, and they're like cavers. I would never do that. People go on spinny rides at the like the Midway or the county fair. Again, not my cup of tea, but people are paying
Sheila,
money for it.
Sheila,
David,
I have
don't
to interrupt here because you know, fair rides are fantastic, and every couple of years I make a pilgrimage to Cedar Point, which is the mecca in the world for roller coasters. It's in Sandusky, Ohio. You're getting too personal here. I saw how you reacted on a curvy road on a small mountain in Israel. It looked like you needed an air sickness bag, which I don't understand because you can strangle a wolverine with your bare hands. I've seen your hunting trophies, so like, let's not get too ridiculous. Amusement park rides are completely fine. That has nothing to do with nudism.
I think it's all the same. Some people don't like certain things, and then other people are weirdos and they love those things. It's all the same thing. You like spinning around and going upside down, and that is a horror show for me. You're the weirdo. I'm the normal one.
My dream in life is to take you to Cedar Point and strap you into Top Thrill Dragster just to get a video of that reaction on your face. But Sheila, I believe Mr. Producer says you have some super chats that you have somehow ignored.
Because we were engaged in such stimulating conversation that these things just sneak right past me. And thank you, everybody who is pitching in the super chats. That we genuinely appreciate this. We know it is a very difficult time out there for a lot of people. A lot of people are out of work. And we know, I just want to tell you that every little bit counts. And I appreciate every single one of these. Okay, we've got one from Gabriel Mainville for $10 Canadian. David, one day I would like to meet you in Montreal. Gabriel, be careful what you wish for. I would like to ask you some more detail when you had to deal with the police of Montreal. That was so funny. David, why don't you respond to that?
Oh, the police of Montreal? Was that at the Justin Trudeau press conference? Yeah, that was funny. Well, not so funny when it happened, mind you, but Gabriel, I was simply trying to ask Justin Trudeau, who had appeared at a boxing club to do a photo op, no questions allowed, and of course, Rebel News being Rebel News, we weren't even allowed in the building. And there was there were protesters protesting Canada's involvement with the Haitian regime. These were Haitian people and their allies, and it was a peaceful protest. And somebody called the cops, presumably with the Liberal Party, and a couple of these people for what I could see is absolutely no reason. There wasn't even harsh language being bandied about where we're hauled away. And I don't think that, I think that looks like Keean's encounter with the ID cops at one of the debates. But when I was trying to ask Mr. Trudeau a question as he boarded that Liberal bus, a Montreal officer pushed me to the sidewalk. I actually bumped my head. And I will say this, Sheila, the fellow who was boxing Trudeau, right, he saw what happened and he came running out of the gym, and he was the only person there, I wish I had his name, that showed some compassion. He was saying, "Are you okay? I saw what happened. That looked like a nasty fall." So I give props to that person. But a complete overreaction, and I don't know the Montreal, police force. I don't know if they have that kind of reputation. But to me, with myself and the protesters, the Haitian protesters. Here we go. Thank you, Mr. Producer. I think we're. And down goes Brown. and of course, when I got up to my feet, and I simply said, "Why did you do that?" And this is really despicable, and I wish law enforcement wouldn't do this. Nobody saw anything. The sun was in their eyes. I wasn't looking that way. And that really bothers me, Sheila, because you'll have, say, a nightclub shooting here in Toronto. There's like 350 people in the club, and nobody saw anything. And the police always do this appeal, come on, be brave, do the right thing. If you're an eyewitness, if you've got cell phone footage, step forward. And my experience with cops is that they play that game too, unfortunately, when it's one of their brethren that is doing something nefarious. So anyways, Gabriel, thanks for bringing back such pleasant memories of your beautiful city.
Okay, we've got more super chats. One from Peter Mercer for $2.79 Canadian. I don't see a super chat, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Got one from David Koziar for $5 Canadian. No super chat, but thank you very much. Another one from Peter Mercer, looks like, for $2.79 Canadian. And no super chat. We've got one from, oh my God, I'm going to butcher this Norwegian name. Onir Canute? I'm not sure.
Wait a minute. This is one of these fake names that when you pronounce it, it's going to be something naughty or something like that.
I know. I actually appreciate the cleverness of those kind of names when they pop up in the super chat. And he gives us $50
Wow,
I guess that's Norwegian krone, not to be confused with the krone of Chappaqua, which is Hillary Clinton. And he says the Sweden response or the Norway response. Sweden's response is just to let everybody go back to work and sort of pretend like nothing's happening. And I think Norway is cracking down a little harder on everybody. I'm not sure. I haven't looked too closely at Norway, but I do know that Sweden is sort of doing a real-time experiment on its citizenry. And I've seen some evidence that it has been effective, but then as things are sort of happening in this last week, maybe it's not as effective as I thought it would be. So I'd have to look a little deeper into that. But pretty daring for a country to just basically do nothing. I think they're encouraging hand washing and sort of not touching your face in public, but there's no mask wearing or anything like that. And just going back to the Czech Republic for a second, because I ended up down a real rabbit hole with the Czech Republic after seeing that story about them ticketing nudists.
What do you do with the ticket? You don't have any pockets, right?
Where do you put it? I don't know. You know what? Whatever. But they've basically done nothing else other than encourage mask wearing, which I think is going to be the most difficult thing for the Western world to get on board with, because it is not we show our faces culturally speaking. We sort of have an apprehension not to cover our faces. it's associated with, like trying to hide your identity. But in Asian cultures, Taiwan, Hong Kong, they wear masks as a matter of like public hygiene and respect to other people, like holding a door open for somebody. And I think in the Czech Republic, their politicians sort of got on board early and were wearing these masks at press conferences. And I think until such time as like our like thought leaders and I shouldn't call politicians thought leaders. That's the last thing they are. But until we see like more public individuals wearing masks out there when they're out of the house, I think people are going to have a real hard time getting on board with it. I mean, and in these Asian cultures, they're basically waiting for China to kill them with a superbug every 4 or 5 years. Yeah. So it's a little than what it's like in Europe and the West.
But Sheila, if I may interject, one part of Asian culture, Japanese culture in particular, I'd love for us to appropriate when things get back to normal, is eradicating the handshake and just doing a dignified bow when you meet somebody. I think they were way ahead of the curve. I mean, I believe the origin of the handshake, if we go back centuries, it was to show that the hand that you hold the weapon in didn't have a weapon. So it was like, see, I come unarmed. Even in the best of times, when you reach out and shake someone's hand and, it's clammy, sweaty skin, it's like, ooh, right? So I am perfectly okay to move forward with our Western culture with having the dignified Japanese bow. What do you think, Sheila, when things get back to normal, whenever that might be, it might be several weeks, several months, who knows, do you think that this is RIP for the handshake?
I don't know. It's going to be a hard adjustment for me because not only am I a handshaker, but I'll like bring the other hand in for like a warm and engaging like hand hug.
You've never given me one of those.
Because I hug you. I just like go in for, I just bring it in, David. That's what I do. And so it's going to be a little bit of an adjustment for me to like not
me, Red Butler.
spreading my germs all over everybody I know. It's going to be, I think people are going to be apprehensive to start shaking hands again. I didn't realize it was to show that you were unarmed. I thought it was to show that the hand that you hold the weapon in is stronger than the other guy. So I always like to crush somebody's hand. I don't know. That's just me.
Oh, yes, the hand crushers. I really love those guys.
That's me. We've got one from John Reed. No relation, I don't think. $2.79 Canadian. Cara Halios kicked out. What red Tory do we vote for? I'm not here to tell you who to vote for. But I think, just absolutely ridiculous that you would kick somebody out of the leadership race because he was critical of somebody else in the leadership race. Like, that's the whole point of a leadership race, is that you're critical of the other guys and pointing out the other people's flaws and promoting your own ideas. So if 50% of that is not something that you can do, how do you have a leadership race when everyone's Sheila, just like standing around giving each other thumbs up about what good job they're doing? Like, how does that make you stand apart from the other people?
This is the Conservative Party of Canada continuing to commit hara-kiri on a national stage. It is so sad to see this. Jim's a good guy. Oh, by the way, to all our viewers out there, Ezra will have an interview with Jim tonight, and tune in for that, because Jim is one of the few people who is indeed a straight shooter. But at this point, I mean, and I hear this even from red meat conservatives, is I'm looking at the front runners in this race whenever the convention's going to be. It's not going to happen in June. And who do I support? And it's a feeling of desperation. I would say, Sheila, unless somebody can, put Stephen Harper at gunpoint and force him into the race and be the leader for this party, I can easily see this Liberal Party getting a majority mandate in the next federal election. And believe me, folks, it pains me to say those words, but as it stands right now, Sheila, do you see any hope?
I see more of the Mitt Romney-ification of the Conservative Party of Canada instead of looking towards the UK with Boris and the Republicans with Trump and some of the more audacious Republican governors and politicians. Instead of embracing that like bold, brash conservatism that, you sort of kind of get from a reality TV star like Donald Trump and you see Boris doing things differently and shooting from the hip kind of thing. We're actually going the other direction. And it's making it so unpalatable and frustrating, and it's so demoralizing for conservative voters to have to pick the least worst of the worst. I don't even want to say the best of the worst, but the least worst of the worst. That's what it's coming to, instead of somebody with new ideas who treats the media like the enemy that they are. There's none of that happening. For example, yesterday in one of Trump's press conferences where this 70-plus-year-old man stands there for 2 hours and takes hostile questions, as opposed to our youthful, gregarious prime minister who saunters out, flips his hair around, takes 6 minutes of reads a script, tells everybody that yes, I am doing well, I am awesome, turns around and goes back inside. He actually showed in his press conference the media downplaying the coronavirus risk while showing how Trump was taking it seriously from January on. And he showed this to them. He totally went on, instead of just playing defense and smacking down the media like he normally does when they ask questions and he remarks that they're being ridiculous. He actually took the time to prepare a video to show them in their own words how ridiculous and biased they are. And to watch it as a Canadian, it's so surreal. It's we would never see that here.
Wasn't that so awesome, Sheila? And by the way, Mr. Producer, Johnny on the spot as he always is, he has that clip.
Great.
So if you haven't seen this, folks, sit back and enjoy.
In 5 years, when I'm not here, those papers are all going out of business because nobody's going to want to read them. But now they like them because they write about me. Now, with that, I have a couple of interesting. We have a few clips that we're just going to put up. We could turn the lights a little bit lower. I think you'll find them interesting. And then we'll answer some questions. I'll ask you some questions because you're so guilty, but forget it. But most importantly, we're going to get back onto the reason we're here, which is the success we're having. Okay? Please, you could put it on. Thank you.
People should be more concerned right now with the flu in this country.
A lot of people are concerned about the coronavirus because they're hearing a lot of news about it right now. But the reality is, comparing it to the flu, for example, it's not even close to being at that stage.
What if it is worse? Is this a moment where maybe countries put politics aside, a little bit of pride aside, and do we have U.S. officials, should U.S. professionals such as yourself get involved?
How worried should Americans be about coronavirus?
Coronavirus is not going to cause a major issue in the United States.
Well, we've asked them to accelerate whatever they're doing in terms of a vaccine. We will be suspending all travel from Europe to the United States for the next 30 days. To unleash the full power of the federal government in this effort today, I am officially declaring a national emergency. Medicare patients can now visit any doctor by phone or video conference at no additional cost.
The first 1 million masks will be available immediately.
Wow. And the same people, Sheila, that were dismissing the Wuhan virus and saying, more people are going to die with the flu, blah, 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 are now saying, why didn't this regime take this more seriously months ago? The very same people that were dismissing this back in January. This is unbelievable.
Yeah. Could you imagine, though, the leader of the Conservative Party making a video of all the ridiculous things that CBC had said about the coronavirus in January? Could you imagine? And then playing it for them in a press conference there would be more people dying of heart attacks that day than the coronavirus, because finally somebody in the Conservative Party found their testicles. But we're never going to see that. We are absolutely never going to see a conservative leader treat the media like the enemy. Pierre Poilievre sort of does that, but I don't know what went on there. But all of a sudden he's not running, and he was sort of the early favorite. So, I feel like there was some pressure for him to step aside. But
that is a mystery.
It is a mystery. I'd love to know what went on there. But outside of Poilievre, we really don't have anybody who treats the CBC like, as Ezra puts it, the nuisance plaintiffs that they are. We still
and Sheila, on that note, if I may, before you get to the next super chat, folks, just to show you how horrible it is, it's not just the mainstream media party, if you will, that is guilty of, well, in the case of Justin Trudeau, never asking the tough questions you want them to ask. But our very own Sheila Gunn-Reid a couple of days ago had a superb commentary that the junior media party, that would be CBC Kids, going by the communist manifesto of get them young, get them forever, they had the Prime Minister on their show, CBC Kids that is, and let's see what kind of PR the young ones were dished out, courtesy of the state broadcaster and our Prime Minister.
My name is Gwyneth Scola, and I am 8 years old from Maple, Ontario. And I would like to know, how is your family keeping busy while social distancing? Thank you.
Thanks, Gwyneth, for your question. Obviously, it's a difficult time for all families right now, from doing lots of homework on computer and keeping up with schoolworks to trying to play different games and keep busy throughout the long days with brothers and sisters without being able to talk to or see friends, talking a lot on the phone and over FaceTime. Kids are trying to find different ways to get through days when we are all stuck at home, where we're not able to go out and see our friends. We're not able to do the things that we usually like to do, but we're really holding together as families in Canada, and that's a really good thing.
I am seeing that the pandemic has caused a reduction in pollution. What will the Government of Canada do to protect the quality of air when the economy starts up again?
That's a really great question. We know that we have to protect the environment. We have to make sure we're fighting climate change every single day. During this time of pandemic, of crisis, there's less economic activity, so there is less pollution. But as we come out of it, we're going to have to make sure that we're keeping up our fight against pollution, that we're doing things like eliminating single-use plastic.
Sheila, I'm thinking back to my childhood, and I'm thinking of the CBC kids shows I grew up with, Mr. Dress Up, The Friendly Giant. I don't remember being preached about environmentalism and the whole litany of things that the Liberals embrace. This is just shocking to me that, you see this, I guess, indoctrination going on with our tax dollars.
Those questions totally weren't scripted by those kids either. Like, kids don't care about that stuff. Like, I have kids roughly that age. The one kid asked Justin Trudeau what he's doing with his family to keep busy. Well, he answered in the complete and total abstract because he wasn't with his family. At all. So he's like, families are doing this and families are doing that and families are on Skype and families are this, because he couldn't answer the question because he wasn't doing anything with his family to keep busy. But what kid would say oh, I don't know if I'm going to go back to school this year. I can't see my friends. My family's going to get a ticket if I pay outside. I can't see my grandparents for Easter. Is the Easter bunny going to come? No, pollution's down. What are you going to do to make sure it stays that way? What kid asked that question? This whole thing was baloney propaganda from start to finish. And, CBC Kids is grotesque. If you take a wander over there, you'll want to throw your computer in the garbage. It's just a disease. It is a disease the likes of which coronavirus I mean, it's just gross. If it's not talking about kids being gay or trans or stumping for the Liberals, it is like 99% climate change. It is terrible. It's issues that kids they don't care about. It's like they've never actually met a kid. It's like what grown-ups think, what left-wing grown-ups who've never met kids think about. If you talk to a kid, they wouldn't care about any of it.
It's kind of like you get the vibe that the puppet master, Gerald Butts himself, is writing the copy for this show. But Sheila, I understand from Mr. Producer, you have yet more
so many super chat, because we have the best viewers on the internet. We've got one from Rick Mercer.
That'll be the day.
That'll be the damn day. We've got one from Peter Mercer again. If Rick's your brother, tell him I say hey, but I doubt it. He gives us 279 Canadian, says, great job, Rebel. Awesome journalism. Thank you very much. We've got one from Craig McDonald. Hi, Craig. How are you? Haven't seen you in a while. 279 Canadian. Going back to my nudist comment, Craig says, I can't keep clothes on my 2 and 3-year-olds. You know what? I had one like that. And I was horrified when she started kindergarten because she would get frustrated and then just like take off her clothes. She just didn't like how clothes felt when she was mad. And so I was worried that once kindergarten started, I would be getting phone calls from the school. But it never happened. One time she got in trouble from the bus driver. And she was walking up the driveway and she's like winging her coat into the bush and then winging her shoes into the bush. And then her shirt flew into the bush and she was like in her underpants by the time she got to the door. So I knew that she had some sort of emotional thing that happened on the bus. But by the time she got her pants off and she was comfortable, she was fine. I've got one from Dragon Joe. $5 Canadian. What is your opinion on having play parks wrapped up in more tape than a crime scene, especially when children are a group that is not at risk? Isn't that sad to see? Like, you go to these places and it does. It looks like there was a murder at the play park outside. Or the dog park where like it's so that dogs can run around. You're not standing beside anybody really. Your dog is like running around. You're throwing a stick with the dog.
Yep.
And yet you still can't go to the dog park. I mean, it's so strangely thought out, but it's like everything government does. I think generally speaking, government is terrible at making decisions without seeing the unintended consequences of their dumb actions. And I think the coronavirus has sort of laid that bare for all of us to see because their dumb choices, we're the ones living with the consequences. They're closing the dog park so that we're social distancing. But the idea of a dog park is so that you're outside with your dog, which by virtue of being outside with your dog is social distancing.
No, you're right, Sheila. And the dog park thing, I don't understand. If the dog owners were responsible enough to maintain at least 2 meters apart, then what's the danger here? Some of these closures just really don't make sense to me, but let's hope. I mean, I never thought I'd ever see anything like this in my lifetime. Let's hope we never see something like this. And let's hope also that, I'm trying to think of the silver linings in the coronavirus crisis that we're in. And one is that we'll never allow ourselves, I hope, to be caught so off guard in terms of having such a low supply of PPE, the personal protective equipment. And also, Sheila, my fervent dream is that, the idea of that when things start to get back to normal, that there'll be a fortress North America once again in terms of manufacturing. That if we reach out to people, and people will be recovering from this for years, and we are going into maybe a depression, who knows? But you know what? If you're buying a mountain bike and it meant that to have it made in Canada, it's going to be $150 more. You know what? I'll pay that $150 gladly if it means that we get to avoid this garbage that we're living through even a century from now again. So that is my hope. And the last thing is to recognize the oil sands as this incredible driver of energy of products that are much needed, and where would we be without it, instead of being vilified by the likes of this current government. So I know those are high hopes, to say the least, but that is what I'm hoping, comes out of this on a positive note, Sheila.
From your lips to God's ears, David. We've still got more super chats. We've got one from Jean-Francois Pierre, $5 Canadian. David, I think the name of the fighter was Patrick Brazo. I think you're talking about the fight from a long, long time ago when Senator Patrick Brazo fought Justin Trudeau, and Ezra did the color commentary, which was interesting.
It was unbelievable. I remember that well because I was with Sun News with Ezra at the time. This was 2012, if memory serves me right.
Yeah.
I was looking at the pictures of Patrick Brazo, and I mean, the arms on that guy, I thought I was doing a series of promos for Sun News, boosting Mr. Brazo. If you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. I hope none of that still lives on the internet, because what happened in the ring, Sheila, that night? Because I really thought Justin was going to have his you-know-what handed to him. It's not so much that Brazo ran out of gas, but the gas tank fell out of the undercarriage of the truck. It was only explained to me afterwards that, and I don't know if this is true, that Brazo's like a 2-pack-a-day smoker. So his only chance was in the first 40 or 50 seconds to land a haymaker, because after that, the cardio went south like you wouldn't believe. And Trudeau just had his way with him. It was something to see. And you know what? I got to say, I want to apologize for that, because I think Sun News, if Justin Trudeau is the monster, Sun News was Dr. Frankenstein. We helped create the monster. That fight raised Justin Trudeau's profile so high that in retrospect, maybe we should never have done it in the first place. But hey, it's all water under the bridge now, eh, Sheila?
Maybe your network deserved to die. Okay.
Just for that.
If only just for that. We've got one from Peter Toth, gives us $10 Canadian. Did you hear reports of doctors complaining about death certificates being altered where a person dies of a heart attack and then happens to have COVID-19, falsely listed as dying of COVID-19? I didn't hear reports of doctors complaining that death certificates were altered, but I did hear that Governor Cuomo flatly admitted, I watched the press conference where he said that if you die and you have COVID-19, then you automatically get counted as one of the COVID-19 statistical deaths.
Oh, interesting.
So, I mean, I think Candace Owens of PragerU, she did an investigation and discovered that a baby who had been, I think it was accidentally smothered by its caregiver, accidentally. Ooh. I don't know if it was the mother or what. The baby, upon autopsy, had been determined to have had COVID-19. And so the baby who was smothered by its caregiver accidentally, or however, I don't know the full details of the investigation there, but the baby definitely didn't die of COVID-19, but the baby tested positive upon autopsy for COVID-19, and that got counted.
That's
and
ridiculous.
Reported.
Sheila, that's like saying
that a baby died.
Yeah, but that's like saying the baby died of natural causes, because if the poor thing wasn't smothered by its caregiver, it would have lived about 95 and then croaked, right? I mean, that is crazy. But anyways, Mr. Producer was taking a page from Lady Menzoid and telling me to shut my mouth because he needs you to read all these beautiful super chats we're getting. So
okay,
go for it, Sheila.
From Lisa Leto, hydroxychloroquine is now available telemed through Dr. Jerome Corsi website. I don't know, but thank you for your super chat. We got one from Dave Anderson for $5. How long is it going to take Real Conservative to support Maxime Bernier and the PPC? I'm not sure. We have been as fair as we possibly can to Maxime Bernier. He, unlike the Conservatives, he's willing to come on our shows. And that's a credit to how he's an advocate for free speech and not scared of the CBC. So Indeed. We've got one from Proud Boys Calgary for $5 Canadian. Hello, Justin. I hope you had a good Easter. he says, I missed the chance to be baptized at Easter because of the CCP flu. Trudeau doesn't need to follow quarantine except when he avoids work, though. That is so sad. That it's true. Justin, I know you've been working very hard to do your RCIA work through the church, and it's terrible to hear that. But one set of rules for you and one set of rules for Justin Trudeau. Yeah. We've got one from Islanti or Islanti, $5 Canadian. Governments are doing these kids Q&As to make adults feel like idiots for questioning lockdowns. Isn't that the truth? Only kids would question the government. Yeah, that's very true. I see that Catherine McKenna is doing like her little kids climate Q&A things, even though she's not the climate change minister anymore. But I suppose better than her trying to do the work of infrastructure minister, because I feel like she could be really damaging if she tried to work over there. Okay. Bob G gives us $2 Canadian. No super chat. Proud Boys Calgary. Ban single-use plastic caution tape.
Yes.
Yes. We've got one from, I'm going to try my Russian here. Suka Killer. For $50 Canadian, holy moly. Now I hope I really said that right. We need to keep talking about this. Hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, and zinc to treat COVID-19. Why is the media, Health Canada, Liberal government hiding this treatment or choice versus waiting for the vaccine? In Alberta, we've decided, our government, Jason Kenney, our premier, have decided, look, we're not waiting for Health Canada because Health Canada has just been a series of bad decisions all along and then flip-flops later on. We've decided that if a credible health agency like the FDA has already approved a drug for treatment in this way, we're just going to use it. We're just going to go around the federal government and figure it out for ourselves, because there's no need for Albertans to be dying while we wait on the federal government to make a decision and then backtrack it 72 hours later. And this whole coronavirus outbreak is proving to a lot of Albertans who are maybe on the fence that we don't need the federal government so much when we can secure our own airports, inspect our own meat, and now approve our own medicines.
Indeed.
We'll keep going. We've got Robert Williamson for $2.50 Canadian. Will COVID-19 be with us forever? Now, like the flu, I think so. I don't think it's ever going to die out. I think we'll end up with maybe some immunity within the herd, so to speak. But I don't think it'll ever really go away. I think this is just one of those things. We've got one from Wolf of Odin for $2 Canadian. Canadians will soon say enough and open the economy. Good news out of Saskatchewan. It looks like they will announce a plan to open the economy. I don't know when the plan will take effect, but they're announcing their go forward plan, looks like next week. So that's kind of exciting. Wow. Yeah. We've got one from Reg Porter for $10 Canadian. No super chat, but thank you very much. We've got one from Cindy McSeven. Great to be a rebel in these times. Thanks, the rebel. Let's get our pitchforks out. I think that the public is not far from pitchforks and torches if they have to keep being locked up any longer. It's a little easier to be locked up in Alberta because we still have like 2 feet of snow on the ground. I think it was snowing when I came downstairs to do this show, and I think today it's going to be 0. But I think like 2 nights ago, overnight, it was like minus 22. But as soon as it gets really nice, you're going to have a real hard time keeping Albertans out of nature. And I think we're going to have a rebellion on our hands. We've got one from
the pitchfork reference, Sheila, that wasn't about harvest season or something like that, was it? Or
it could be about shoveling the BS out of Ottawa. We've got one from Carol Bohm, $10 Canadian, no super chat. We've got one from Kevin, but Kevin is written as though I'm screaming Kevin. $2 Canadian, no super chat. And Mr. Producer Justin is still typing. Nope, he stopped typing. So maybe that's the last one. Maybe I'm finally all caught up on everyone's very generous super chats. Holy moly. David, we've got 2 minutes left in the show.
Yes, the 2-minute warning, and I'm looking at our topic sheet. It resembles an iceberg. We only did the 10% on top of the water. We didn't get into all this. But here's the deal, though, folks.
Every week.
Ezra will be back in this chair tomorrow. And Sheila and I, moving forward, we're going to be your guest co-hosts every Tuesday and Thursday. Is that correct, Sheila? For the foreseeable future.
That sounds vaguely like something I agreed to, or that I was like voluntold to do, which is fine because no complaints from me. Like I said, this is, like I say, every single time we do this, this is the fastest hour of work that I will do all week long. Because for me, I get to feel connected to some of my colleagues who work in the Toronto office, you and Mr. Producer, and some of our colleagues who are managing the chats. It's kind of fun for me because I normally work out here by myself. And I love to interact with our people. And I love, like I said, this is a democratic way of interacting with our people. If they want to talk to us, they can definitely talk to us. And we get to find out what's on their minds. And we have one last super chat, David. It's from Robert Williamson, $3 Canadian. Make the Chinese CCP pay big time. Yeah, wouldn't it be great if there were massive lawsuits against the Chinese government for willingly hiding information that led to the spread of this disease like wildfire through Europe, through New York, through Italy, to some extent, the UK. I mean, it's just outrageous. I say this every week. I say I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and then I give you some sort of conspiracy theory. But I think that this thing accidentally got out on the Chinese, and then they just let it go because they didn't want to be the only one with a hobbled economy. And that's what I think.
You know what? I'm not so sure of that, Sheila, because who does China sell to? And the answer is the entire world. So you cripple everybody else's economy and there go those markets. But on the topic of lawsuits, I don't know how successful they'll be. I heard last week that one of the first countries to actually file a lawsuit, and hopefully I got my facts right, is India. And I wish them every success. But of course, winning a lawsuit and getting the people in Beijing to pay up, that might be a tale of two cities. And Sheila, I see that we're fresh out of time. I just want to thank yourself, Sheila, for co-hosting with me. It is such a fun hour, and I especially want to thank our viewers for tuning in, and especially those who gave money. These are terrible, terrible times in which to ask for money, but you always come through for us, folks, and we really do depend on you to keep the lights on and to keep telling you the other side of the story. So, on the behalf of Sheila Gunn-Reid and myself, thank you so much for tuning in. You'll have Ezra here tomorrow, and you'll have the two of us back on Thursday. In the meantime, stay safe.